Hey guys, welcome back to Dreamland. Today we're diving into the next part of this series. Last time Wing vanished right after the wedding, so now we're going to see where he went and how Wang is going to handle it. So let's begin. Wing sat beside his father's bed. The weight of the wedding is still clinging to him like a suffocating will. His wedding suit smelled faintly of incense, but his face was drained, eyes burning with a mix of anger and ache. I did my part of the deal, he whispered, voice hard but trembling at the edges. Now it's your turn. Mr. V lay motionless, his breathing shallow, machines echoing in the sterile silence. Wing leaned closer, fingers tightening around his father's still hand. I'm giving you a month. He pressed on, each word sharper than the last. If you don't come back to me in a month, I'll end this marriage. Do you hear me? I won't hesitate to divorce Wangji. His throat bobbed, bitterness and grief twisting his voice. So if you don't want that to happen, then wake up. Open your eyes. Come back to me. Then his bravado cracked, trembling into something raw. He clutched his father's hand with both of his own, pressing his forehead against it. I'm tired of waiting for you. I need you, Dad. Can't you see that? The last words broke apart in a whisper, choked and uneven. His grip tightened, both hands holding on as if anchoring himself, staying there, clinging to the warmth that weirdly lingered. For a moment there was nothing but the sterile hum of the machines and the sound of wings breathing against his father's skin. And then suddenly it happened. The faintest twitch beneath his fingers, his head sort of, eyes wide with disbelief, searching his father's face. Again, he whispered urgently, staring at the still hand. Do it again. But nothing came. The silence settled once more, heavy and suffocating. Wings' pulse hammered in his ears, but his certainty was unshaken. He had felt it. His father had moved. It was real, not a dream, not desperation. Driven by desperate hope, he shot to his feet and ran to call the doctor, his heart pounding with the fragile, dangerous thrill of belief. For the first time in so long, hope felt alive. Meanwhile, Wangji had never dreamed someone could treat him like this. He didn't know much about Wangji, but from the moment their marriage was decided, he had never been shown even the smallest trace of warmth. This coldness, this complete absence of acknowledgement was something he had not accepted. He was alone, lost. The ceremony was over, the guest had gone. A date he had heard nothing from Bing. He didn't even have his number. For the first time, Wang Ji truly didn't know what he was supposed to do. Should he call So Young and ask to stay with him? Should he book a cab and make his way to the Wee mansion on his own? He was still trapped in his thoughts when someone suddenly appeared. Wang Ji straightened, turning toward the entrance. It was Mr. Wee's driver, rushing in with a terrified look. I'm sorry, the man blurted breathless. Sir told me to take you home after the ceremony ended, but he hesitated, eyes lowering. I got busy with something and couldn't make it on time. It's all right, Wang Ji said quietly. The driver blinked in surprise, then asked hesitantly, You're not going to scold me for standing you up? A small smile touched Wang Ji's lips, faint but sincere, like you did when we first met. He teased. The driver flushed with embarrassment, bowing his head. Anyway, Wang Ji added softly, it's not something you did on purpose. There's nothing to feel bad about. After a pause, he asked the question lingering in his chest. Can you tell me where is Wing? Speaking his name aloud for the first time felt strange, almost too personal, too heavy. The driver looked up startled. Sir didn't tell you he went to see his father? Wangji shook his head silently. Probably because if he told you, you would have wanted to go as well. And the driver faltered, searching for the right words. He wanted to spend some time alone with his dad. Wangji said nothing. He understood, but the silence pressed hard on him. Come, the driver urged. Let's take you home, or Sir will kill me for ruining your wedding night. He stopped himself midway, correcting awkwardly. I mean, for ruining your special day. Wangji gave a small nod, and with that they drove to the mansion. The mansion was nothing like Wangji had imagined. Enormous, glittering, it rose before him like a palace, but it felt lifeless, too grand, too hollow. It didn't look like it was waiting for a bride, or in his case, a groom. Already Wangji missed his small, cozy apartment, the comfort of familiar walls, and most of all, the presence of his father, who must be sitting there alone now. A sigh escaped him as the car slowed to a stop. The driver came around and opened the door, but Wangji hesitated. He sat there, unmoving, suddenly wishing he didn't have to step out. At last, he forced himself up. The night air felt colder here. Each step toward the door only tightened the knot in his chest. He had never spent even a single night away from his own home, and now he was accepted to live in this vast and familiar house. The mansion might have been beautiful, but it was not his, and he didn't feel welcome there. Not by the silence, not by the absence. Maybe if Wing had been beside him, he wouldn't feel so nervous, so unwelcome. What are you thinking? The driver asked gently, pulling him from his thoughts. Go on, sir, ring the bell. He's probably waiting for you. Wangji lowered his gauge, still unsure. The driver, noticing his hesitation, tried again. I know this isn't the wedding you wished for, but with Mr. V's condition, no one is happy right now. Hit the light of this family. Without him, Madame Leo is always wearing a scowl, and nothing pleases her. And as for Sir, his voice softened. Only Mr. V can make him smile. Without him, there's no joy in this house. You just need to give it time. Everything will settle. Wang Ji understood. That was exactly why he had wanted this wedding to wait until Mr. V recovered. This was not the right time, yet it was Wang himself who had insisted, rushing ahead when no one else had the strength. And now he was avoiding it, as if pretending couldn't do what was already done. But it couldn't. Wang's chest ached as he stood before the silent doors. He understood that Wang didn't want to begin a new life without his father by his side. He respected that. Still, marriage was not something one could run away from. Now that they had crossed the threshold, responsibility could not be avoided. Wang Ji knew what he had to do. He would find Wang, he would talk to him, and he would make him understand. He did not need to avoid Wang Ji. Yes, their marriage had been rushed. Yes, neither of them had time to prepare. But Wangji was willing to wait for as long as it took until Wang was ready. With that determination, Wangji took his steps. The heavy gates of the women's closed behind them with a metallic thud, sealing Wangji into a world that felt far too grand, too cold, too unfamiliar. The driver gave him an encouraging note before leaving, and suddenly Wangji found himself standing alone before the towering double doors. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring at the polished wood, his reflection faintly visible in its scene. His chest tightened. This was supposed to be his new home, but it felt more like stepping into someone else's life. Finally, he rang the bell. The door opened almost at once, as if someone had been waiting. A woman in her early 30s greeted him with a polite bow and gestured for him to enter. If she was surprised to find him standing alone at the threshold, she hid it well. From outside, the mansion had looked like a palace. Inside, it was undeniably one. The marble floor gleamed under soft chandeliers, but no warmth lingered in the air. It was a house, not a home. The moment Wangji stepped in, he felt a hollow stillness, as though the grandeur swallowed itself. No one waited to welcome him. The absence pressed on him with quiet disappointment. Sir, your room is upstairs, second door on the right. The maid said softly. You can rest there. Your luggage has already been placed inside. Wangji gave her a polite nod and climbed the staircase, each step amplifying his nerves. At the door, he paused. If this was his room, then it was also Wing's. Was he already inside, waiting? The thought quickened Wangji's breath. He steadied himself and turned the handles. The room opened into dim light, just like the mansion. It was vast, almost too much to take in at once. A king-size bed dominated the center. the kind that looked as though it could swallow him whole. To the side stood a sofa so wide it could have been mistaken for another bed. It's large enough to sleep on, a towering closet all arranged in careful order. Though everything was carefully placed, but to Wangji it felt overfilled, suffocating rather than comfortable. The weight of the room pressed in on him, a reminder that none of it belonged to him. And then his gaze drifted to the balcony. Moonlight spilled in through the open glass doors, silver pulling across the floorboards. Outside, climbing roses traced their way upward, their pale blooms swaying gently in the night air. Compared to the heavy furniture and the overwhelming space, the balcony felt alive, light, soft, and strangely inviting. For a moment, Wang Ji stood still, letting his eyes linger there. The roses seemed to breathe in rhythm with the night, the quiet glow softening the air. It was the only corner of the room that edged him, the only place he could imagine himself in. Wang Ji lingered on it, imagining how freely he could dance there, though the thought only brushed him before he pushed it aside. The rest of the room was impressive, yes, but hollow. The sofa, the bed, the closet, luxury arranged neatly around him, it carrying no warmth. Only the balcony offered something that felt real. But Wing was not inside. Wangji exhaled quietly, revealed and disappointed all at once. Where was he this late at night? He hadn't seen Madame Liu either. She had been the one tirelessly managing everything. No doubt she retired to her bed early. Resolving not to overthink, Wangji pulled his trolley to the closet. But when he opened it, every inch was already filled, rows of carefully pressed shirts, jackets, and ties. Wangji stepped back, realizing just how meticulous Wing must be about his clothing. He decided against touching anything before speaking with him. Instead, he left his luggage by the floor, extracted what he needed, and went to wash up. The bathroom was so polished and fragrant it hardly seemed it belonged to a man. Shelves brimmed with luxury shampoos and shower gels, the kind of scents Wangji had never imagined owning. Still, he set them aside and used his own modest thing. Standing there, surrounded by such extravagance, he felt again how far apart their worlds truly were. He did not belong here, in this mansion, in this life tied to someone like Wing. Yet fate had decided otherwise. It wasn't as if he had ever lacked before. His father had given him a soft bed, warm water for his showers, every comfort he could afford with quiet effort. Those simple things born of sacrifice had always been precious. When he returned fresh and weary, Wangji thought of waking up. It would be rude to sleep before Wing arrived. But his stomach grumbled, a reminder he hadn't eaten since before the ceremony. The thought of wandering into the kitchen in search of food made him uneasy. He sat instead on the sofa facing the balcony, willing himself to stay awake. Minutes slipped by. He lay back, telling himself it was only for a moment, that he wouldn't fall asleep. The silver glow spilling in through the balcony soothed him, and without realizing, his eyes closed. He woke not long after, restless. The sofa, for all its size, was no weight. As his eyes blinked open, he froze. The balcony was no longer empty. A figure stood there, back turned, dressed in a white shirt and black trousers, a faint trail of smoke curling from his hand. Wangji sat up, heart pounding, wink. He had finally come. Yet instead of relief, nervousness flooded him. Why hadn't he woken him? Perhaps he hadn't wanted to disturb his sleep. Now, though Wangji had no idea what to do, his chest tightened with the sudden weight of their strangeness. He wished Yang were here, his sharp tongue, his easy reassurance to tell him how to move, how to speak. Should he announce that he was awake or wait until Wing turned on his own? But what if he saw Wangji sitting silently staring and found it strange? His palms clenched. Oh, cut the crap, Wangji, he scolded himself. You're only making it worse. This was just a man, a stranger, yes, but a stranger who was now his husband. Wangji stepped toward the balcony, his footsteps soft against the floor. The night air was cool, moonlight pouring across the roses that curled up the railing. His voice came out low, tentative. Wing, the figure standing there didn't turn, but Wangji saw the small shift in his shoulders. The way they tensed at the sound of his voice. He knew he had been heard. Why didn't you wake me? Wangji tried again, his tone gentle, almost uncertain. I was waiting for you, but he hesitated, embarrassed. I must have fallen asleep. The silence stretched. It felt strange, as though he were speaking into a wall. Still, he pressed on. You went to see Mr. V. How is he? Nothing, not a word. Wangji drew a breath. He had been holding so much inside, too much for too long. If he kept circling around with empty words, nothing would change. He needed to be honest. Wing, he said carefully, I know you're upset about your father's condition. Anyone would be, but worrying alone won't help him. You need to stay strong for him and for your mother. His voice softened, carrying both conviction and quiet hope. Whatever little time I spent with him, I could tell he's a lively man. He's not going to give up so easily. I believe he'll recover very soon. You just need patience. Wangji rarely spoke so much, but the words spilled out of him now. So many nights he had wondered if anyone would console him, if anyone would simply ask how he was coping. He had never dared to say it aloud until now. For a moment, the only reply was the hiss of a smoke as it curled from the cigarette in Wing's hand. Then finally, a cold laugh. Oh, please, save it for my dad. His voice dripping with disdain. It won't work on me. The words were sharp, dismissive, but as Wing turned at last, he cursed himself inwardly for doing so. Moonlight framed Wangji's face, illuminating every delicate line. His features softened from half sleeves, cheeks faintly pink, damp hair curling slightly against his temples. Even in something as plain as an oversized white t-shirt, he looked radiant. Wing's chest tightened when he had walked into the room earlier and found him sprawled so comfortably across the sofa he had felt suffocated, as though every corner of his life had been invaded. The sight of Wang's belongings among his own things, his scent faintly mingling with the room, it all screamed that he was no longer alone here. And now, looking at him again, suffocation twisted into something else. No, he sobbed the thought back violently. What are you doing, Wing? You're not special. You're not any less handsome than him. Don't forget what mom told you. Don't get fooled by appearance. Wangji was still watching him, brows slightly knit in confusion. The innocence in his gaze only fueled Wing's irritation. He raised an eyebrow. I don't understand, Wangji admitted quietly. The single sentence, earnest, unguarded, snapped something in Wing. Of course you don't, he snapped, stepping closer. Don't play the part of the good hearted victim with me. I know exactly the kind of person you are. His tone hard and bitter. People like you don't go after jobs or real work. They hunt for a rich partner. Someone with money, with luxury, with a name. And now you've got it all. He gestured sharply to the room around them. So enjoy it while you can, because you can't hold on to what doesn't belong to you. Each word came with another step forward until there was barely any space left between them. His voice dropped, ice cold. You might have earned your way into this family, but don't mistake that for a place in my life. You never will, so keep your distance. The words hit Wang Ji like a blow. His blood ran cold, his chest tightening as if the air had been knocked from his lungs. Never in his life had anyone spoken to him like this. Never had anyone treated him with such deliberate cruelty. He had never even been scolded harshly, only praised for his kindness, his dedication, and now this. He forced himself to breathe, to study the tremor in his chest. His voice was small when he finally managed to speak. I I don't know what makes you think that. But as far as I know, it was your father who wanted this wedding. And you agreed yourself. Wing cut him off with a sharp step forward, their faces only inches apart now. His voice was deadly quiet, but it struck like steel. Look at you. acting like you and your father had no sin in this, as if you're the poor victim whose life was ruined. Stop pretending. The heat rose in Wangji's chest. He could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. Enough. He had endured the insults, the disdain, but this twisting of the truth he could not accept. His voice for once came firm and steady, his gaze locked onto Wings. I'm not saying my father and I didn't agree, but it was your father who asked for this marriage. You know it as well as I do. So why are you acting like this is some scheme of ours? Why make me out to be, his voice hardened, the kind of person who would trap you into this? If anything, seeing the way you treat me now makes me wonder what your father's intentions were when he tied my fate to yours. The last word slipped out sharper than Wangji had meant. Shut up. Wings' roar cut through the air, his composure shattering, his eyes blazed with fury. Don't you dare speak of my father like that, you damn gold digger. The insult sliced through Wangji like a knife. He froze, stunned, not only by the word, but by the sheer force behind it. No one had ever yelled at him before. No one had ever looked at him with such raw hatred. His lips parted, but no words came. What could he say? What defense could stand against someone who had already decided he was guilty? The silence was heavy, suffocating. Then, without another word, Wing turned, storming from the room and slamming the door so hard it rattled against its frame. The night swallowed him. He drove aimlessly, his grip tight around the wheel, thoughts tangled in anger and despair. At the hospital, just hours earlier, he had thought he glimpsed hope when his father's fingers twitched under his hand. But the doctor's explanation had cut it apart. Just a reflex, a meaningless fraction of moment. Nothing that promised consciousness, nothing that meant recovery. It had felt like the universe was mocking him, like nothing was in his control, everything slipping further out of reach. And then he had walked back into this, into him, that gold digger, sitting there with his soft voice, his gentle eyes, pretending to care, pretending to understand, pretending to belong here. Wing's jaw tightened. He could still see it. That warmth in Wangji's gaze, the sincerity in his tone. If he hadn't known better, it might have almost convinced him. Almost. But no, he wouldn't allow himself to be fooled. Not by him, not now. Wangji didn't know how long he had been standing there, staring at the same balcony that had filled him with a quiet thrill only an hour ago. Now it looked different, colder, heavier, and though even the roses were mocking him. His chest tightened as he replayed what had just happened. The words still rang in his ears, sharp enough to pierce through the silence of the night. The way Wing insulted him, no, nothing could have prepared him for a blow like that. It wasn't just hurt, it was shock, raw, unshakable shock that made the room feel unreal, like he had stumbled into the wrong life. Since the first moment he had seen his picture, Wangji had unconsciously built an image of him. Someone bright, someone strong, someone who would be difficult but genuine. That imagined being was nothing like the man he faced tonight. But perhaps that was his own fault, his own foolishness. Still, at least Wing had not pretended. He hadn't offered illusion or played at kindness, only to snatch it away later. No, he had laid his judgment bare. He had called Wangji a gold digger, accused him and his father of chasing money, of trapping him in this marriage. A bitter truth pressed into Wangji's heart. Wealth doesn't guarantee kindness. A mansion might stand tall and gleaming, but it didn't mean the heart inside was vast enough to match it. Often people who had everything chose instead to make their favorite pastime belittling those who had less. A tear slipped, unbidden, from Wangji's left eye. Just one, but it was enough to sting because he had not cried. Not truly since his mother's death. Back then he had sobbed helplessly, not knowing how to cope with the emptiness she left behind. She had left without warning, without promise, and yet Wasn't that in itself a broken promise? Shouldn't a mother stay? Shouldn't she have kept him safe? And tonight felt painfully the same. The wing had never promised him anything either. No vows of affection, no words of warmth. Yet the moment he cast Wangji aside, it was as though something had been shattered. Something Wangji hadn't even realized he was holding on to. Even without promise, people still break us. He looked around the vast room again. When he had first arrived, he hadn't felt like he belonged here. Now he was certain of it. He thought back to how it all started. If only he had never met Mr. V, none of this would have happened. The thought of Mr. V brought another step to his chest. His father. What would he tell him? No, he couldn't. His father's health was already fragile. If he told him the truth that this marriage was not just loveless but hostile, it would destroy him. The man had only wanted to honor a friend's wish. If he discovered instead that he had ruined his own son's life by trying, he would never forgive himself. Wangji couldn't let that happen. Still, Wangji's pride burned. Could he truly stay here, knowing being despised him? Every instinct screamed no. He should leave tonight. But if he did, his father would know. And Soyang, no. He couldn't call him either. If Soyang found out how Wing had treated him, he wouldn't stop to think. He would storm in, drag him out, and expose everything. And though Wangji wanted that escape more than anything, he couldn't let it happen. Not yet. He was trapped. And Wing hadn't asked him to leave. At least not now. And perhaps that was its own cruel answer. If he had been so unwanted, Wing could have stopped this marriage long before it happened. Instead, he had let it play out. Now Wing had to face the consequence as well of not saying no on the right time. So he would stay, not to honor their father's bond, not to play the obvious son, but to buy time. Time until Mr. V recovered, so that when the truth finally came out, his father would be hurt less. Time until he could walk away without shattering the man who had already sacrificed so much for him. He would endure this place, even if Wing despised him, even if every corner of this house screamed he was unwanted. Wangji would stay. Wing had told him to enjoy the luxury while they lasted. If only he knew. There was no enjoyment here. Every chandelier, every polished surface, every heavy drop only pressed harder against Wangji's chest, reminding him he didn't belong. This wasn't comfort, it was suffocation. This mansion wasn't a home, it was a cage, but for now it was the only place he could be. He drew a slow breath, squaring his shoulders, whispering to himself in the stillness, You can do this, Wangji. You can't fall now, not yet. Resolve studied him, though it acted. He didn't know what Wayne planned for the days ahead, but for his own part, he had decided he would endure. His body was heavy, drained from the storm of emotions. He needed sleep, though he doubted it would come. Still, he had to try. He turned to the bed, exhaustion pressing down on him like lead. The thought of sharing it twisted his stomach, so he lay on the farthest edge, turning his back to the empty space beside him. The mattress dipped beneath his weight, unfamiliar and unwelcoming. He lay still, hardly daring to move. He had always been a quiet sleeper, his position rarely shifting through the night. Tonight that stillness felt like armor. The sofa in the corner caught his eye, but he dismissed it almost instantly. It was too uncomfortable for even one night. And this wasn't just one night. This was the shape of his life for a while. He closed his eyes, though his chest still ached from the evening suns. To his surprise, sleep found him quickly, exhaustion winning over turmoil. But it did not last. Not long after, Wangji gasped awake, body jolting into icy awareness, as though he had been thrown into cold water. That's it for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed this part. Now, don't be stubborn, drop your thoughts in the comments. Yes, I'm calling you out because you always ignore my request. Do you secretly skip this part, or are my pleas just too weak? At least type a quick okay so I know you're alive. Just kidding. Anyway, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next part. Till then, take care.